In small villages, people learn early that it's safer to mind their own business. But every now and then, something happens that makes silence impossible. In the village of Mikhailovka, fear grew slowly. First, it was whispers, then rumors, and eventually, two men were dead. What shocked the public wasn't just the violence, it was the person at the center. Because the one everyone pointed their fingers at was a 21-year-old girl. Her name is Yelena Pavelyaykina, blue eyes, calm on the surface. If you met her on the street, you could have thought maybe even sweet. You wouldn't think she could be a callous murderer. Yelena was born in 1998 in Mikhailovka. Her father Pyotr was a farmer, and he wasn't the kind of man you'd argue with. Short-tempered, tough, and forceful. He had a way of getting what he wanted, often through anger, sometimes through violence. Insults came easy. Hitting even more so. The villagers knew to stay out of his way. In contrast, her mother was quiet, soft-spoken, the kind of person who endured far more than she should have. Neighbors would often see her sneaking away or hiding from him. Sometimes he even chased her with an axe. Then he'd come back. Flowers, apologies, acting like nothing had happened. And she would always forgive him. For years, she tolerated the chaos in that house. Until in 2012, she had enough. She left. And when I say left, she didn't just leave Piotr. She ran. She packed up and vanished while Piotr was out working in the fields. Where did she go? Maybe to some city, maybe somewhere else in the region. She changed her number, cut all ties, and she never returned. She left because she feared he'd take her life, and honestly, if she hadn't run, that could have been her fate. And this was the moment when people started noticing a shift in Yelena. At school, she still managed to hold herself together. Average grades, no real trouble. But gradually, she began changing. Her temper grew, resentment built up. Piotr raised her the only way he knew. Strict, demanding, punitive. Sports were mandatory, boxing, gym, farm work from a young age. And Yelena, strong and resilient. Fights didn't scare her. Bigger, taller men didn't stop her. And she often walked away the winner. People described her as blunt, direct, unwilling to accept being contradicted. She rarely chose her words and used her fists often. There were times, just glimpses, where something almost unhinged peeked through, a madness in her that unsettled anyone who saw it. After her mother disappeared, Yelena wasn't completely alone. Her father, Piotr, became the center of her world. He was everything: mentor, protector, comfort, authority figure, all rolled into one. When tears came, he was there. When life hit hard, he taught her to take the blow and keep going, physically and mentally. And every time she accomplished something, whether a good grade or a day's work on the farm, he beamed with pride. Yelena looked up to him in a way most kids look up to heroes. Insult him, cross him, that wasn't just an offense. It was a personal attack she wouldn't tolerate. After school, Piotr made a decision. Yelena would move to the city of Omsk, enroll in an agricultural college, and train as a vet assistant. He wanted her to escape the cycle that had trapped her mother. He didn't want her wasting her life in the village, stuck among cows or drowning in alcohol out of boredom. His vision was clear: a city life, independence, opportunity. A future that was her own, not dictated by circumstance. She did as he wished. She completed college and earned her diploma in 2019. But the city never truly felt like home. It was unfamiliar. The streets, the people, the whole rhythm of life. It wasn't for her. The village, with all its dust, familiarity, and routine, called her back. The thought of starting over somewhere else just didn't appeal. Back home, things were changing. Piotr's health was failing. His heart weakened. His legs could barely support him. The farm was slipping through their fingers. Some of the workers were stealing. Animals went unfed. Problems stacked up, one after another. And Elena stepped in. Every weekend, she took the bus back, tackling issue after issue, until eventually, her trip became permanent. She didn't leave anymore. It was here, in the village, that Yelena's second character emerged. She was no longer just a daughter helping her father. She wasn't a temporary assistant or a shadow figure in the barn. She became the one who ran the farm. Men, older, stronger, some rougher and wilder than her, quickly learned she was not to be argued with. The farm had always relied on hired hands, locals and outsiders, young and old. And Yelena became the enforcer. Her method was simple. Fail at your work, face the consequences. Arrive late, consequences. Make a mistake, consequences again. And if words weren't enough, her hands did the talking. One shove, one firm grip, and the argument was over. Respect wasn't demanded with threats alone. It was earned through action, through presence, and through sheer will. In the village, a nickname quickly stuck: the Overseer. It sounds almost funny. She looked small, fragile even. But that image fooled no one. Years of farm work, years of hauling heavy loads, years of boxing. It all built her into someone tougher than most men around her. Physically, mentally, she carried the weight of it. People didn't quite know what to make of her. Some admired her for how she kept the farm running, how she made grown men fall in line. But admiration was tangled with fear. Even her father, Piotr, would sometimes chuckle with a wry smile. "She's rough, yes, but the farm's in order, isn't it?" And he was right. As Yelena grew older, she became more like him, not just in looks, but in temperament. That same sharp edge, the bursts of aggression, that quiet, unshakable belief that any problem could be handled by force if needed. You could see her father in her, walking, speaking, reacting. When 2019 came and she graduated college, diploma in hand, skill set ready, a path as a vet assistant was waiting. But she didn't take it. Familiarity tugged her back home, back to the farm, back to the rhythm of labor, lawn nights, the clatter of bottles. By that time, she had changed intensely. A glance, a word, even a small misstep could set her off. Her temper wasn't just quick, it was volcanic, boiling over in ways that startled everyone who crossed her path. By the end of that year, the girl the village had once seen as a neat, calm student type was gone. What remained was someone sharp, volatile, dangerous in a way people didn't entirely understand. Everyone noticed, everyone whispered, but most kept their distance. They knew her father, they knew her temper, and they knew better than to provoke it. And then it happened, the first crime, the one that would linger in the village memory for a long time. Right when she was at her lowest, when drinking had become part of daily life, and when no one was surprised by her sudden bursts of rage, that's when the first act of violence came to pass, and it remained unsolved for quite some time. August 19, 2019. A warm summer evening settled over the village. The kind of night that feels ordinary, until it isn't. Next to Yelena's house, a small annex, part bathhouse, part shed, had been converted into a casual gathering spot. Workers drifted there after long days on the farm. They drank, complained about life, swapped stories, and shared village gossip. It was routine. And Yelena, she was always there, never missed these nights. The noise, the alcohol, the subtle power she wielded in the room. It was intoxicating for her. Orders, jabs, sharp comments. Every interaction fed her in a way only those evenings could. Among the small crowd that night was a 37-year-old Sergei Viktorov, a quiet, ordinary man in the village. Married, 2 kids, worked as a shepherd on the farm. He drank, but no one considered him a threat. Easygoing, fairly unassuming, he was the kind of person people barely noticed. Until that night, because Sergei spent the evening irritating Yelena. Why? That detail was never clear. Perhaps a careless word, maybe a laugh at the wrong moment. Maybe it was nothing, just the way he existed. But that was enough. Whatever the cause, he got under her skin. By 3 in the morning, the gathering was winding down. People were leaving, everyone except Sergei. He was blackout drunk, sprawled on the couch, too intoxicated to stand. And that's when something inside Elena finally broke. Later, she would say it herself. He'd been getting on my nerves all evening. I got angry and let my hands do the talking. She attacked him with hands and her feet, striking his head, his torso, and his face. The assault left Sergei with multiple broken ribs, a ruptured liver, and a torn spleen. The very injuries that would eventually take his life. But it didn't stop there. While he lay unconscious, bleeding to death, Elena committed a very disturbing act using a wooden handle of a shovel. I don't think I need to explain in more detail what exactly she did, but it does classify as SA. And then she took out her phone and she started taking photos of herself beside him. And she shared them. They went straight into local village chat groups, roughly 10-15 people. Along with the images, she sent a message. This is what will happen to anyone who doesn't listen to me. And she punctuated them with a string of laughing emojis, as though it were a joke. After a while, Yelena realized Sergei wasn't moving. At first, she didn't even fully register it. She would later admit she didn't understand what happened right away. But once the reality sank in, her behavior changed. It was as if something inside her clicked, a switch telling her to cover her tracks. She dragged his body into a garden cart and wheeled it down the road, roughly 200 meters away, leaving it near a small path. Carefully, almost methodically, she arranged him so it looked like he had just collapsed under a tree, maybe taken a nap, maybe passed out. Then she went back inside the building, scrubbing, trying to erase every trace of what had happened. Morning came, and a local woman spotted Sergei leaning against the tree on her way to work. For the villagers, the scene made sense at first glance. You see, Sergei had epilepsy. He had fallen before. Accidents like this were believable. It seemed tragic, but plausible. The police arrived quickly, and yet, even as they began asking questions, the villagers uttered the same old theory. Seizure, alcohol, a simple misfortune. No one imagined something darker had occurred. But the autopsy left no room for doubt. The report revealed internal bleeding caused by multiple traumatic injuries. This was no accident. Rumors began to ripple through the village almost immediately. Gradually, the picture of that night started to form, largely because of the photos Elena had shared in the group chats. Still, no one came forward. Rumors could be ignored, explained away. Fear could not. Fear of Elena, fear of Piotr, fear of a family that had for years commanded an instinctive kind of respect, a careful distance. The police questioned the villagers. No one saw anything. No one heard anything. Even those who had been at the gathering stayed silent. There wasn't a single direct witness. Not one. No complaints, no accusations. Elena's hands seemed clean. Had it ended there, the case likely would have been closed for good. Another accident, another unfortunate story. Elena might have walked away without facing any consequences. But 2 months later, she did something that completely exposed her. This time, her actions left no room for doubt, and suddenly, the villagers no longer stayed silent. October 16, 2019. The same outbuilding next to Elena's house, and once again, a familiar mix of people had gathered inside. Farm workers, neighbors, a few women, and a man who wasn't from around there. The night was like many before. Alcohol, laughter, arguments, gossip, the kind of evening that stretched long into the night. Among them was a 31-year-old Igor Kozlov from Belarus. He'd come to the region to work, to earn some money and maybe save enough to leave one day. On the farm, he repaired equipment. Quiet, polite, ordinary man. The kind of person you'd never think would end up in the center of a tragedy. The conversation drifted towards Yelena's father. Dangerous territory. Anyone who knew her understood immediately. Don't speak poorly of Pyotr, especially not in front of his daughter. But Igor, whether unaware, careless, or simply unlucky, made a comment. Something small, something like a joke or a tease, nothing intended to offend. But for Yelena, though, it was enough. Any insult aimed at her father triggered something inside her. Pyotr wasn't just a parent, he was her anchor, her idol, the one person she trusted above all others. Witnesses later described what happened next with just one word: madness. Her face, her movements, she had completely lost control. Before anyone could react, she lunged at Igor. Too fast, too sudden. No one had time to intervene, to pull him away, to make sense of what was happening. She struck him repeatedly, using her hands, feet, as well as a chair, over and over. The official report would later count at least 38 hits from her fists and kicks, plus additional blows from the chair. Continuous, rapid, merciless. The people in the room saw everything. Fear paralyzed them. Some tried to stop her with words. They were careful not to provoke her any further. But their voices didn't reach her. She was consumed by rage. When it was finally over, Igor laid on the floor motionless, unconscious, alive but unresponsive. And yet, nobody called for help. No ambulance, no immediate aid. Later, witnesses said it was the alcohol, the shock, and the disbelief. They assumed he would wake up. Some left in fear, some in silence. Some told themselves, "We didn't see a thing." Pyotr, Yelena's father, was at home that night, but he knew, he saw, and he didn't step in. He didn't intervene. He stayed inside while the scene unfolded in the outbuilding. Igor remained on that floor all night, motionless. By the morning, he was gone. He never woke up. The official report would later list the cause of death as traumatic brain injury and suffocation. That moment, the loss of Igor was different. It broke something inside the village. The fear that had kept people quiet for years started to crack. With Sergei, they had swallowed their unease. They looked away. But this time, silence was no longer an option. Talk spread quickly. Not speculation this time. Not rumors that could be ignored. This was a murder, a deliberate attack. and it had been seen firsthand. People realized that this time the police wouldn't walk away that easily either. Soon after, the investigation shifted. Authorities started connecting Igor's death to Sergei's back in August. Questions became pointed, methodical. Witnesses felt the change. The scrutiny was real. Slowly, almost hesitantly, a few villagers began to speak. Not many at first, but enough for a pattern to emerge. The coincidences were impossible to dismiss. Same location, same group of people, and at the center, Elena. The parallels were striking. Re-interviews turned the tone serious. Questions cut deeper. The pressure was undeniable. And suddenly the villagers who had stayed silent realized something. This time, keeping quiet could have real consequences. Testimonies started trickling in. Small hints at first. I didn't see it clearly, but I heard something. Then, gradually, voices grew stronger, more certain, and eventually, several admitted the truth outright. Elena had attacked Igor. Everyone there had witnessed it. That became the turning point. Almost simultaneously, investigators recovered the photographs Elena had taken during Sergei's death. The pieces fell into place. The story that could have been uncovered back in August was finally visible. Only now, with the villagers speaking, the truth could no longer be ignored. Silence had ended, and the pattern of her violence was exposed. October 17, 2019. A few minutes past 2 p.m., and Elena was picked up near her home. And here's the strange thing. She didn't resist, not a single gesture of defiance. As if this arrest was some tedious task she had no choice but to complete. Her first interrogation lasted nearly 5 hours. And in that long session, she didn't hold back. Elena gave a full, detailed confession, covering every moment of both incidents. She spoke of Sergei first, how he gotten under her skin that night, how she lashed out, striking him with her hands and feet, and how the handle of a shovel came into play as well. She recounted what happened after, step by step, without omitting a single detail. Then she told the story of Igor. She said he had insulted her father, and something inside her just snapped. She acted, she claimed, as she felt necessary in that instant. But within 24 hours, her story changed completely. Piotr, her father, was frantic at the time. He realized his daughter wasn't facing a minor accusation, not a fight, not even a serious injury. She was being charged with 2 murders. He moved fast, hired 2 lawyers. Some villagers claimed that he even sold off parts of the farm, tractors, machinery, anything of value he could spare to pay for their services. And once those lawyers met Elena in the detention center, her story changed. All that detailed confession, gone. She now claimed she hadn't done anything. It was self-defense, she said. People are accusing me out of jealousy. The police pressured me into confessing. But it was too late. By that point, investigators already had overwhelming evidence. Her own words were just one piece. On Igor's body, her fingerprints and DNA were found. Blood on her knuckles confirmed what she had done in the shed. At both crime scenes, traces of blood remained, despite her efforts to scrub it away. Tests showed matches to both Sergei and Igor. The garden cart she had used to move one of the bodies, found right next to her home. And then there were the witnesses. For months, they had stayed silent, held in fear. But now they spoke. Slowly at first, rather cautiously. But their testimony was crucial. Investigators later noted that if the villagers had been honest in August, Sergei's death could have been solved in a single week, and Igor could have been alive. Later, Elena was sent for a thorough psychological and psychiatric evaluation. The results were clear. She was fully sane. No mental disorders, no conditions that could explain or excuse her violent outbursts. She had been drinking on both occasions, but intoxication does not erase responsibility. The investigators concluded her motive was a volatile combination of alcohol, her personal character, and those sudden, uncontrollable bursts of rage that had defined her behavior for years at this point. When Elena's case finally reached court, it revealed yet another layer of her character. How much she understood the power of perception, of the way people saw her. She asked for a jury trial. It felt calculated, almost like a test. Ordinary citizens, she must have thought, might look at her and see a quiet, pretty young woman, someone incapable of extreme violence, the kind of girl who didn't belong at the center of two brutal murders. But reality hit quickly. Jurors would come from the local district, people who knew the family. They had seen Yelena's temper firsthand, her fights, her domineering presence, and the respect or fear she commanded from even grown men. The same caution her father inspired. So she changed course. She withdrew the jury request, and the trial was handed over to a single judge. Given the shocking and sensitive nature of the crimes, the trial was closed to the public. In court, Elena remained astonishingly composed. Calm, detached, she didn't cry, didn't beg, she didn't lash out, and she didn't show even the slightest flicker of remorse. It was as if she were merely an observer, watching the case unfold from a distance. When she finally spoke for herself, she chose her words carefully. "I offer my condolences to the families of the victims, but I'm not guilty." Her voice was steady, her tone confident. She seemed to believe with quiet certainty that appearances alone could influence judgment. The charges she faced were dire, to say the least. Intentional infliction of grievous bodily harm resulting in death. That was for both attacks. And for what happened with Sergei involving the shovel, there was another charge. Taken together at their maximum, the sentence could have been life imprisonment. Still, her youth and lack of prior convictions played in her favor. The court considered these mitigating factors. On August 7th, 2020, the court delivered its verdict: 13 years in a standard security penal colony, a place where inmates have to do mandatory labor. The sentence reflected her age, her clean record, and the conclusion that while her actions were brutal, she had not set out with the explicit intent to kill the victims. Both her father and her lawyers tried to fight the sentence. Piotr even went as far as selling more of the family's farm equipment and property just to cover the costs of the appeal. But it didn't change anything. There was simply too much evidence stacked against Elena. Every detail, every trace, every testimony made it impossible for an appeal to succeed. Today, Elena is serving her sentence. Sources report that she works in production and occasionally corresponds with her brother. What about her mother, you might ask? Well, she never came back. Not for the trial, not afterwards. She remained entirely absent. Under the law, Elena will eventually be allowed to apply for parole. But because her case is classified as especially severe, she must serve at least 2/3 of her sentence before even being considered. Either way, she will walk free by 2033. In the end, the question that lingers isn't only about what Elena did. It's about how she became the person who could do it. The girl who grew up on that farm learned early that life was hard, that control mattered and that weakness was not tolerated. Her mother was gone, her father ruled with a very strict and demanding hand, and the lessons she absorbed there were the only ones she ever seemed to trust. But whether that upbringing explains anything or explains nothing at all is harder to say. Thank you for watching, and rest in peace, Sergey and Igor.